Welcome to Milbank's Unmetered. I'm Ryan Skinner, VP of Growth and Revenue at Milbank. Metering is changing fast and it's playing a bigger role than ever in keeping power safe, reliable, and ready for the future. Today we're digging into what's evolving, what's staying the same, and what utilities and partners need to know to stay ahead. I'm joined by Jack Hackathorn, Senior Director of Utility Sales at Milbank, and John Bowen, Milbank's Senior Product Manager. Together, we're having an honest, experience-driven conversation about electric metering, industry trends, and where things are headed next. Well, guys, thanks for joining us on Milbank's first podcast. Really excited to dive into this. You guys have, let's maybe just jump right into it. Between the two of you, how many years do you have in the electrical industry, Jack?
Well, I started in the electrical industry at about age 16, working with my dad, pulling wire, drilling holes and hanging boxes in residential electrical homes. He moonlighted in the as an electrical contractor. So if you want to add that, I'm dating myself 46 years.
Just yesterday.
Yeah, seems like it.
John?
Just a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually got into it, first of all, right out of high school. I went to a Votech in 1995, spent a year there, and then got out and went straight with a contractor. And off and on, just a brief outing. Obviously, I went to college for 4 years and so forth and out of there. But outside of that, pretty much in the electrical industry. So, well over 25 years.
So, currently you both are senior people, obviously, in Milbank, right? So maybe just give a brief.
What do you think he means by senior?
Well, he was looking at you, Jack.
He was. He definitely was.
So maybe just give us a quick, what you're doing today and what that means to Milbank and maybe some of our partners.
Sure, I'll go first. Today, my role has kind of evolved. I've always been in the utility industry ever since I've been in sales for about 30 years now. And I am now the Senior Director of Utility Sales, which means my main role is to go out and visit with utilities, make sure our standards are up to date, building relationships, and basically touting Milbank in front of all of the major utility companies across the United States.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, my role here at Milbank, it started out when I first came on board. I was tech support and quotations. And after a few years of that evolved over into product line coordinator, where I spent about the next 11 years of my career here at Milbank. With product development, being diligent to stay on top of any changes with utilities, customer relations, certainly several, different shows and things of that nature to go to and tout our product, etc. Took a short stint outside, did outside sales for about a year and a half, and then came back in as senior product manager, where we've got a team of 3 great product developers, and they're constantly working in their respective regions to ensure we stay on top of changes with utilities, newest product out to our customers in regards to meter sockets, CT cabinets, the whole works. Pretty much everything that makes up the metering and enclosure division of Milbank.
Kind of where I wanted this conversation to go, as we're really focused on the electric industry and where it's been, where it is today, and where we think it's going. So, from where you've started out, this is directed, I guess, at both of you guys, but where you've started out, what is the biggest difference from 30 years ago to kind of where we are today? And then we'll, I guess, move from there into kind of where do you see things going? We have people listening who, might know a lot about this, right? And it's kind of just common knowledge to them. But we also have people listening who maybe work in distribution or, work at Milbank, but not necessarily involved in the day to day, who don't know some of these large trends that we all see on a daily basis. So, from the start, what's probably some of the biggest changes you've seen to get us to past some of the recent code changes?
Well, it's funny when you look at it in a macro sense, and John can attest to this, that in general, the electrical industry is kind of resistant to change, if you will. I was at a meeting several years ago where the keynote speaker, he was actually the VP of Florida Power and Light, and he said, if you resurrected Alexander Graham Bell from the dead and took him into today's telecommunications plant, he wouldn't recognize anything in the building. But if you resurrected Thomas Edison from the dead and took him into today's substation, he'd recognize 80% of the items that are in there.
Yeah.
So as a whole, the electrical industry has not really evolved that much. I mean, when you look at cable and products and breakers, I mean, sure, they've made them more efficient and things like that. But as a general rule, electricity has operated the same way for 70 plus years. Now, that being said, I mean, you're talking about homes, back in the day that used very little electricity. You went from, the older homes that I think John's probably done some work in, and I've done in, where they had knob and tube, where it was you climb into the attic and it looks like you climbed inside of a piano. All you see is like bare wires going all directions.
Swinging from the wires.
And with a little piece of insulation in between the ceiling joists, the wood ceiling joists. I mean, that's the way it was. And cutting through plaster walls and fabric coated wire, really brittle, most of it aluminum.
For sure.
But for the most part, the actual function of electricity hasn't changed that much. Now, the products that we use today are a lot more innovative than they were. I didn't know if you want to touch a little more on that, John.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's spot on. As far as, that kind of brings us into some of the evolution of where we're at. Even when I started with Milbank almost 19 years ago, we sold a whole lot more meter sockets. And I would still say as a whole, we do. But that trend has really shifted due to new regulatory compliance put out with the NEC and even with UL, the shift from, meter sockets to meter mains or meter combos, as some people refer to them, with the external breaker. And a lot of that has recently been brought on recent years, as early as 2020 with the code change for safety purposes for our first responders. You think about it, most houses, they've got their main panels, and oftentimes those are in basements or they're in garages or somewhere that's a little more obscure. And so if there happens to be, a fire in the home or whatnot, to get to those main disconnects or breakers, oftentimes those first responders, those firefighters, they would be going down smoky basements, dark basements, whatever the case was, obviously putting lives at risk, etc.
Or they would cut the service entrance cable outside the building.
Outside. That's also a technique that we've certainly have heard of, even from a local firefighter that's in the local region here we talked to. But now with the advent of more meter mains, meter breaker combos, etc., due to NEC 2020 code, all of those main disconnects are outside the home, providing a lot more safety for first responders in that regard. That's certainly been a big trend. And, from a product standpoint, that was a big undertaking even here at Milbank. Myself and team members dedicated a good 2 almost solid years of engineering, retooling, a lot of manufacturing times. It was a real big endeavor for our segment of the industry, certainly, and still ongoing in certain places. But probably I'll call it the most disruptive or biggest change from a meter socket manufacturing standpoint, easily in the last 30 years, was the changeover from meter sockets to meter mains.
So, we talked about knob and tube and kind of, the way that service sizes have grown and obviously we're not doing knob and tube, we're running Romex and everything else.
Certainly hope not.
Right. So why do we
get it out?
Why do we think that, these service sizes have increased to where they are today? Maybe give us some history on, if you're building a home in 1975, what size of service is an electrician putting inside your house? And then if I'm building a house in 2026, what's the typical size of a service that's going to my house? And then maybe relate it back to Milbank and say, explain what kind of meter socket would have been going on a house in 1975 compared to in a panel, maybe, and what meter socket a panel might be going in a house in 2026.
Sure. I think that's a really good, valid point that we want to look at. And when you look at the homes that were being constructed in the mid 70s, they're nothing like the homes today, right? As far as size, I think the average home was probably less than 1,500 square feet. Your typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and single floor plan, and there just wasn't a whole lot of home, so to speak. They weren't big homes like you're seeing today. Some of the homes that we did, new construction homes that we did the electrical wiring in, you could fit 2 of those in an average house today. Houses have gotten much, much bigger. And along with that, you have to deal with larger air conditioning units, larger heating units, and then of course a lot of the indoor appliances that are being used today are very different than what was being used back then. So the demand of electricity has gone quite a bit higher than it used to be in the older homes. Even using incandescent versus LED lighting, John and I were talking about that earlier today, that, we're putting LED lighting in all these homes, but it seems like the energy consumption is still at or higher than. And, another thing too is, my dad was always big about putting 100 amp services in, even when 200 amp was becoming more popular, because he said, there's no point in putting a 200 amp service in here. You're just spending money you don't need to be spending, because you're never going to use 100 amps. And even now they don't. The actual 70. Energy consumption, at max in the middle of summertime would be like 70 amps. So, the main reason why I think when we started converting to 200 amp services was because the houses were getting bigger and you needed more breaker spaces, right? You only get in a certain amount of spaces in a 100 amp service, but 200, you're going to add 12, 15 more circuits, something like that. So because the houses were getting bigger and there were, you have guidelines like I think the National Electric Code says you can only put, 11 devices on a 15 amp service and 14 or 15 on a 20. So when you start adding up all the wall outlets and all the light fixtures and all those things, it just required to have more spaces, even though the energy consumption wasn't that much higher. So it's kind of evolved into that. Of course, you have the electric vehicles and
that's been a big play.
Yeah, and we're talking about not just inrush. We're talking about resistive load in those things.
40 to 70 amps.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So then another thing that John and I talked about earlier today is the traditional 25 kVA transformer that the utility company puts out there to feed 4 houses isn't cutting it anymore when you start putting electric cars on all these homes, right? So they're going to have to go to bigger pad mount transformers, maybe 50 kVA, just to feed 4 houses to handle the demand that you're going to see on an electric vehicle.
Yeah, 100%. And the only thing I would add to that, Jack, is we've even seen that in-house here at Milbank with an uptick in 320 amp, kind of the next evolution of the meter sockets, the 320 amp meter sockets versus 200 amps. I was recently out golfing with another coworker in Colorado, and we were riding by and we kept seeing a very common Milbank 320 amp meter main on houses that looked like they were about 2,000 square feet and below. And we're talking about, well, that's the advent of the provisions for the EV charging, which was really prevalent, certainly in the area. So that's coming to fruition. And again, with the addition of the additional 40 to 70 amp draw, or even the potential, a lot of the homeowners are building for the provision of the EV chargers. Maybe they're not going to have an EV car, but maybe the the following owner will. So those provisions are being put into the new houses as well.
And John, aren't we seeing a lot of the utility companies are now requiring?
Yeah.
If you're talking about or looking at having an electric vehicle, or if you have bought an electric vehicle and you want to put EVSE, that a lot of them are saying you need to upgrade your service from 200 to 320.
Yeah, and a lot of that is predicated on the square footage of the house. If you're building a house that's over 2,500 or 3,000 square feet, it's in some of the guidelines
Automatic.
to have that larger meter socket provision put in there.
So we've talked about kind of where the industry was and kind of where we are today. And based on this conversation and just what we see in the industry, it seems like the 100 amp services are absolutely a thing of the past. And 200 amp are here, but we're quickly moving towards 320 services. Where do we see this going? We hear in the news, there's push towards more electrification, right? Gas stoves, moving to electric stoves, gas water heaters moving to electric water heaters. That's more and more demand being placed on these houses. And the last I checked, houses aren't getting any smaller. I don't think people are settling for 1,500 square foot houses anymore. Where do we go from here? Because typically, go from 400 amps. We're going to instrument rated, right? Going over that. So where do we go from here? Or do we know?
That's a great question. It's like pull the crystal ball out, right? Who would have ever thought that we were where we are today, where you see so many 320 amp services going in? The thing that is concerning about that is we have a grid that's already stressed, and we have data centers and everything else going in that are creating more demand on the electrical grid, and then you're also now looking at bigger homes with more ampacity load and getting away from natural gas and fuel oils and things like that. Let's say this. I think in the next couple of decades, they're going to have to become a lot more creative with their generation. And I don't know how to fill that blank in, what exactly that is going to look like, whether it be micro generation or things like that. They're already talking about that with data centers, I think. Right. But what happens if they start doing micro generation for residences?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? There are technologies out there that they can incorporate today. But again, the electrical industry is very, very slow to evolve.
Yeah, and maybe talk a little bit more about that, John. Why is it that we, as a manufacturer, as Milbank, why can't we just say, hey, we have the next best thing here, contractor, start using this new product? Obviously, there's this thing called a utility, right? Mm-hmm. And that's, Milbank as a manufacturer, that's our ultimate customer, right? And maybe talk about that a little bit and some of the hoops that we have to jump through. As a little background on that, as we know, there's 3,400 utilities in the country. And if you've ever touched metering before, you know that every one of those, for the most part, does something at least a little different. Milbank has thousands upon thousands of different versions of kind of the same meter socket, right? So you've obviously been involved in creating new product. You've been an outside salesperson. You've been an inside salesperson. So, what goes into launching a new product as we kind of talk about like the innovative side of this industry, and Jack talking about it being such a slow moving and a slowly evolving industry. Maybe give a little background into why that is.
Sure. Yeah. Obviously, one of our biggest customers, as Ryan is talking about, is the utilities. And it's interesting because every utility does have their preferences. They've all got their own metering department. And there's little tweaks, little differences. Sometimes they want to put what we call a barrel lock guard on, or which is just another secondary method of securing their boxes. Or it could even be, the way they want to bypass power so that they're not actually turning off the power if something needs to be done with the meter, etc. It's basically it's all into the utility preference. And that's why it's been so important for us to have these clearly defined and good relationships with each of these utilities from, I'll call it coast to coast and top to bottom, because they're all just a little bit different. I mean, where one 200 amp meter socket would functionally work just fine in another area, because of their specifications, it's not applicable. It's not allowed. And so that's one of the things we're always staying on top of, is the latest specifications for utilities, keeping those relationships open, so we understand what their requirements are for sure.
Yeah, and so there's all these different versions of these meter sockets, and again, because all these utilities have different standards, and they have standards for a reason. That typically has to do with safety. Maybe Jack, talk a little bit about some of the safety features that go into our products, and some of the specific labeling that's required. We get into test switches and why this utility might use a certain color coding for those test switches. Maybe a little background, because that is a huge part of our company, right? I mean, we're a 4th generation family-owned company that focuses on metering products, right? Mm-hmm. And that's our niche. And our niche is working with all 3,400 of these utilities, and that's a tough thing to do. That's a lot of hard-headed at times. A lot of independent decision makers, and we have to. And our niche has been working with each one of those and ensuring that we're able to deliver what they need. So maybe, safety being a really big aspect of that.
Sure. I think that's what I think has made Milbank relevant for nearly 100 years now, is the fact that we do listen to the utility companies, and when they ask for certain guidelines or certain things to be done, we do it. We try to respond to whatever requirements they may have. We like to call them their own little kingdoms, right? Everybody has their way of doing things, and I can think of several utilities that have merged, and there's been a lot of difficulty with the merger and them trying to standardize on one thing as far as meter sockets go. And to John's point, what he was talking about earlier on the products, I mean, we could build something we think is a perfect meter socket, and we take it to 17 different utilities, and we have now 17 different versions of it, because I want the knockout over here, or I want, let's put 2 hub openings on it, or hey, let's take the wire landing lugs and put them at a 45-degree angle this way, because we do everything underground. It just and we're happy to do that. That's what we're here for. I think that's what makes Milbank relevant, right? Mm-hmm. But as far as safety features go, I mean, a lot of the things that incorporate in the safety is not only the product itself or the way it's built, but the proper usage of the product. Mm-hmm. John mentioned bypass a few minutes ago. We have what we call a lever bypass. And the lever bypass actually is built in such a way that when the meter socket is installed and the bypass is disengaged, so now the energy is running through the meter, the jaws actually clamp down onto the stabs of the meter itself, and it gets to a point where you can't pull the meter out, or you shouldn't be able to pull the meter out. A lot of resistance. I think there's probably some really strong guys that still could, but it's designed in such a way as when the meter is installed and energized and the energy is going through the meter, that you're not able to pull it out without bypassing it first. And it's simple things like that we've incorporated for the utility companies, to where they can pull a meter for service or replacement without ever interrupting the customer's load. They can continue to use the energy while the meter is actually pulled. But misuse of that lever, as an example, now it becomes unsafe. Now, of course, we put labeling in there, precautionary labeling with warning signs, but invariably you're going to have people that are going to not operate it properly, like operate the bypass lever without a meter in it. That's a 100% no-no. You should never operate the bypass lever without the meter in it.
They confuse it for a disconnect.
Yep.
And it's not a disconnect.
They find out real quick that it isn't.
Right.
It's going to arc, it's going to spark, and it's going to blow. depending on how big of a load there is on there. So we can build safe products. You were talking about the test switches. Those are all to be able for the utility company to be able to bypass or shunt the CTs and PTs and do testing while it's still under load. And of course, the CT rated meter socket itself is a safe piece of safety equipment because you're dealing normally with product that's 480 volts, over 400 amps that is being actually reduced down to 120 volts and maybe at the max 20 amps. So the meterman can safely operate anything that he needs to do inside that meter socket without having to worry about 480 volts and 600 amps running through the system and, possibly injuring or killing him.
Yeah, it's all dangerous, but it's more attractive to deal with basically the same ampacity going through a wall plug than it is 400 amps. Yeah, for sure. It's funny. You actually reminded me of a story. You said their own little kingdoms. Reminds me of a story when I was over getting a product approved at a local utility, and I took it into a good friend of mine who was an engineer for the utility for a long time, several years, and I said, "Hey, this neighboring utility over here is doing a product in a certain way. Would you be interested in doing this?" And my buddy said, "Hey, yeah, you can show me how they're doing it, and then I'll show you the right way to do it." And so it's just funny, and a lot of people don't understand it. They think everybody's just single-minded on how we build product, how they use product, but that's certainly not the case. Every utility has their own way of doing things, and always we keep safety to the forefront of our heads and product development for sure. And then along with that also goes a lot of training too. I know I've spent several hours, around at different places, different utilities, et cetera, through the years, showing these safety features and training. And that's something we also try to provide is a lot of training and awareness.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're talking a lot about utilities. Obviously, Milbank is a company that services utilities. I mean, at our heart, that's what we are, right? I mean, obviously we sell through distribution, we work with our manufacturer representatives, but at the heart of our company, it's, servicing these utilities to ensure that you at home as a consumer of electricity, that you can have power on, right? I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And so, we manufacture a product that's reliable, that's safe, that can last a long time. But, as we're filming this, the Northeast was just hit with a historic snowstorm. A few weeks ago, the South was, at one point, I think over 1 million people without power. Mm-hmm. Maybe talk a little bit about, Jack, I mean, specifically you, being in a utility role, how does Milbank, partner with these utilities? So when we have these catastrophic storms, that we have, responses for that. Maybe talk about, how we go about that.
Sure. That's I'm glad you brought that up because it's, I think, something that we try to do to assist utility companies whenever there's a catastrophic event like a hurricane or tornado or, any type of storms that happen that cause mass power outages like the ice storms and things like that. We actually have it's called OneCert, I believe. It's an emergency response to where if there's a major power outage, and of course, it's going to typically affect overhead services. I mean, common sense says when it's underground, it's going to be a lot less. It's going to be a lot more protected from the elements. So a lot of the overhead services is where you see the catastrophic electrical damage and failure, down power lines and meter loops and meter sockets being ripped off of walls of homes and that's where the massive power outages actually occur is through those events. And so we put together a program here at Milbank that in the event of a catastrophic weather-related outage, that we try to respond as quickly as possible to the need. We'll get calls from utility companies, from distributors to get meter sockets out as quickly as we can. And we charge a small, service fee because it is a major disruption to basically shut the power or shut our production plants completely down to build product for the power outages. So there are specific meter sockets that they're going to need, and they need them quickly. We typically try to respond within 3 to 4 days to get product out the door and to where it's needed in the event that there's a massive power outage and they're trying to get people back online. Obviously, it can't always happen that way, but we strive to that it basically becomes priority one, right? I mean, we heard it from the CEO himself the last time we had an event like this, where it was the number one priority. We don't care about anybody else. And I think there's an expectation too, Ryan, that when something like this happens, most people who have their quote unquote regular orders in the system, they're going to expect a bit of a delay because they know that we want to respond to the need of the moment. So we try to get things out within a couple of days, get product in the field as quickly as we can. But another thing that we have to keep in mind is, we're in the Midwest, and where our manufacturing facilities, we could have been affected by that same ice storm or snowstorm, and we could have outages, even in our own plants. We experienced that in El Dorado, Arkansas this last time. So with that being said, we still strive to do everything we can to get the product out the door as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think sometimes it goes overlooked that there's a lot of behind the scenes things that happen when a catastrophic event happens. We all see the different utilities from different areas kind of collaborating together and driving down or up to wherever the catastrophic event happens. But there's a lot of other folks in the electrical industry that are working behind the scenes to help provide them with the product they need. They're obviously on the front lines, kind of like the Marines, but there's a lot of things being coordinated behind the scenes to assist them for sure. And that's certainly something that Milbank tries to do with our OneCert program.
Yeah, and Milbank is just in such a unique position because, we are the handoff between the utility and the customer, right? I mean, we're in such a unique position where most of the electrical industry, I mean, you might be making wall receptacles or lighting and you're focused just on that consumer. And we have that unique position where, the top of our meter socket is utility, the bottom of our meter socket's consumer, right? And, we have, that ability to be an expert with the utility. And also we have the ability to try to be an expert with the contractors. And, we battle that every day. I know that you do, John, in a product position, but we're always thinking about, hey, how do we make this meter socket safer and better and more advanced for our utility partners? But then also we have the exact same question with, how do we make this meter socket better for a electrical contractor and that consumer, right? So we're in such a unique position to be able to see both sides of the industry. So if you're a manufacturer rep listening, or you work at a distributor and you're listening, what are some good questions to be asking your Milbank sales folk when he walks in or he's making a call with you? I mean, what are some things that might be unique? Somebody who works at Milbank and has that knowledge, again, being that handoff piece. I mean, what are some things that that you've seen throughout your careers that might make a Milbank person, salesperson, have just a little bit more of a view into the electrical industry? What makes that unique?
You want to take this one first?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I do think, to your point, they get to see both sides of the electrical industry. They are dealing with contractors on a regular basis, going in and showing new product, and we're constantly trying to be diligent and seeing how we can make their life easier. And I know just a while back we took a trip where we had a dedicated purpose to speak with contractors about what could make their life easier with the install of things like meter sockets and so forth. So we try to take the feedback from the contractors, the installers themselves, and try to incorporate that into our product to make sure we are being considerate of their needs as well. But then on the flip side of that, we're I think maybe from a distributor standpoint, I don't know if it's questions they would have, but there's an assurance there that when Milbank is providing the meter sockets to those distributors, we've already done the background work with the utility. We've already gone in and typically are getting it approved, or maybe one of our sales reps that's a Milbank specialist in the respective territories has gone in and gotten approvals to make sure that we are meeting all of those utility specifications. So if I'm a distributor, I don't have to worry about if it's going to get turned down or red flagged by an inspector once the contractor installs it, because that, again, this isn't an afterthought for Milbank. This is what we do. We do meter sockets, and we're going to make sure it's correct for that specific utility.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of the equation to the Milbank name too is quality. We're known for that. I was recently on a Teams call with a utility distributor who was saying that they had ours and another brand in the building, and they had to keep hiding ours because they were wanting to use up the other brand, and the guys would refuse to use the other type. So I think that, in addition to what John said, we try to, not only do we try to meet the utility specifications and try to hear the voice of the customer on things that we could do. And a lot of our Milbank designs have been based on ideas from utility guys and from contractors. Well, hey, why don't you guys do this? And next thing you know, we're building it.
I can give you several examples. Yes.
Many, yeah. And so, and not only do we try to answer that, but we also try to do it with making a good, high quality product.
Yeah, so we've had some awesome conversation here, and I really appreciate you guys taking some time out of your busy days to come and have this conversation and being on our first podcast, which is really exciting. As we kind of close this out, what are some things in 2026 that you're really excited about? Jack, what are some of those things that are on the horizon that you're working on in your specific role that you're really excited about for this year?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. I'm honored to be the actual first guest with the legendary John Bowen here. But when I look onto the year, and the things I'm looking forward to the most in 2026 is the refocus that Milbank has taken as far as the utility industry is concerned. I feel like, as the industry evolved, we were discussing this morning, that when I first started working for Milbank in 2003, at least 70% of the meter sockets were still being purchased by utility companies directly and being handed out to the customers. And that pendulum has swung in the last 22 to 23 years to where most of the meter sockets now around the country are contractor provided. The utilities still have guidelines of what should be done, and they tell you what you can and can't install on their system. But the product is primarily now being purchased by the electrical contractors through the electrical distribution channel now. As a matter of fact, I did the numbers last night, and I saw that according to Milbank's numbers, roughly 86.5% of the meter sockets. Well, let me rephrase. I'd say probably 80% of the meter sockets being purchased, because we knew there were some odd numbers in there that could have transpired somewhere else.
For sure.
But I'd say about 80% of the meter sockets we sold in 2025 were being sold to contractor purchased versus utility. The 20% was utility. So with that being said, Milbank kind of followed that path, right? And we kind of went down the path of catering more to the electrical distribution channel and the contractor. Not that we didn't have relationships with utilities, but I don't think we made it the focus that we could have. So in my role as utility sales senior director, one of the things that we've decided this year is to get much more re-engaged with the utilities again. A lot of what we consider maybe non-utility manufacturers representatives they're being tasked to become more engaged with utilities around the country, because we feel like there's still opportunities out there that we haven't untapped. And I'm excited about that. We're engaged. We actually will have booths at all the major utility expos. When you're talking about Distribute Tech just happened recently. We've got Tech Advantage coming up, the Rural Electrical Cooperatives big expo. We'll be at that. We're going to be at IEEE. We're attending several regional meter schools this year, either participating or actually doing lessons and instructions in some of those schools. And we've joined a couple of utility affiliations, looking at maybe joining a couple more. So I'm excited about the fact that we're getting back to the utility companies and getting more engaged and more involved in the day-to-day business of the utility companies, and hopefully they can see the value in having Milbank as a great partner.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like exciting stuff. I'm really looking forward to seeing that, and I agree. I mean, there's a huge opportunity for utility, and I'm excited to see how that goes. John, you guys are always on the product side. Got some awesome ideas. You got a bunch of thinkers on your team.
For sure.
What are you most excited about for this year?
Yeah, Ryan, again, thank you for having us on today, and I do appreciate that as well. And yes, I am excited about this year. I'm excited about next year as well. I mean, but this year, it really feels like we're running on all cylinders from a kind of back to normal standpoint. I know it seems kind of crazy to say because, the code's been underway for several years, the pandemic's behind us and whatnot, but we've really freed up what I would call some engineering time this year, and we're really getting back into, not that we were ever out of it, but we're going full force into product development. And I see this year as a year that we're going to be working on different products, new products from all categories, meter sockets, meter mains. I see some CT cabinets in development, et cetera. So I think 2026 is going to be a fun year. I'm looking forward to what we get out of it, and just really re-engage. We got a great engineering team. We've got a great product team. To your point, there's some good thinkers and good ideas, and it's going to be an exciting year.
I agree. I'm really excited about 2026. I'm excited to share the message of Milbank. Our lead times are back to where we need them to be. We're finally in a place to go out and push innovation and push new products and talk to these utilities who maybe we haven't had a chance to. So just really excited about that. And I'm really excited that both of you were able to join me on this new adventure of a podcast. So thank you for being the first guest on the Unmetered podcast. Really excited about that. And for everybody listening, you can find us wherever you listen to your podcast, and please like and share and subscribe.
Thank you for listening to the Unmetered podcast presented by Milbank. Unmetered is hosted by Ryan Skinner and executive produced and edited by Sean McElvain, supported by the Milbank Manufacturing Marketing Team. Make sure to follow us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. The Milbank podcast and all related content are provided for general informational and educational purposes only. The content is intended to share information about Milbank products, industry trends, and related topics, and should not be construed as professional engineering, technical, electrical, safety, or installation advice. Always consult qualified professionals and refer to applicable codes, standards, and manufacturer specifications before selecting, installing, or using any products.